The God of War series is no stranger to some super intense violence and shocking imagery. These things just don't really seem to affect us when playing because, simply put, we're in the shoes of Kratos, a sheer monster of a god that is scared of nothing and can literally destroy everything. But if we take a step back and analyze what happens within the games, not through the eyes of Kratos, but as ourselves, the player, we will see that the God of War universe is incredibly dark and disturbing at times. So today on this God of War themed Halloween special video, I figured that we could take a look at my personal top 5 most disturbing moments in the God of War series, along with a few pretty messed up honorable mentions, with the help of my friends and fellow God of War theorists / historians Kaptain Kuba and John Ford. And with that, let's get creepy, spooky, started.
When searching for more information regarding his past during the events of God of War Ghosts of Sparta, Kratos finds himself in the city of Atlantis, and more specifically in the Temple of Poseidon. After following a vision of himself and his brother Deimos finishing up a sparring session, Kratos comes face to face with none other than his own mother, who is in a frail and weakened state in bed. Kratos was bewildered that his own mother was still alive after such a long time, to which Callisto told Kratos that his father had brought her there. She then reveals that Kratos' brother is also still alive and trapped in the domain of death. Soon after, Kratos demands to know who his father is, but before she can tell him, she is transformed into a terrible and hideous monster, twisting and enlarging her body to the point of being horrifyingly unrecognizable. Her back hunches to the point of her spine erupting from her skin. Her bottom jaw seems to disappear, and her face is stretched and weighed down by a mound of flesh and sharp teeth and tusks. To his horror, Kratos is forced to kill his own mother, which leaves him mentally broken and enraged by the gods who are more than likely responsible for this. Following the Great War between the Olympians and the Titans, the HECATONCHIRES AEGAEON pledged a blood oath to Zeus, only to later betray him and be forever known as the first Oathbreaker. The Furies were so angered by this treachery, they hunted the HECATONCHIRES down and tortured him endlessly. And instead of outright ending his misery, the Furies transformed his massive body into a prison to hold every future Blood Oath traitor that also acted as an example for the punishment that awaits all Oathbreakers. During Kratos' sentence within the prison of the damned, after he attempted to break his own oath to the God of War Ares, who tricked him into killing his own wife and child, the future God of War was chained directly inside of the mouth of AEGAEON. Upon Kratos' escape from his imprisonment, the Fury that was torturing him, Megaera, used her parasitic powers to infect the many arms of AEGAEON, painfully transforming and morphing them into horrible monsters. But the final step of AEGAEON's torture is when Megaera made her parasites burrow under the HECATONCHIRE's eye, mangling and splitting his face into a bug-like creature with mandibles and razor-sharp teeth. After a long and certainly painful battle, AEGAEON was finally put to rest by Kratos, ending his eternal sentence of torment once and for all.
According to the old legend of King Midas, the king in question was given a gift by the Greek god Dionysus. This gift, also known as Midas' touch, allowed King Midas to turn everything he touched into gold, making him incredibly rich and satiating his own greed. But Midas would soon come to find that this gift was more of a curse. He couldn't eat or drink since any form of nourishment that he touched would also turn to gold. The starving king even turned his own daughter into gold, and this brought him great anguish. This leads us to where Kratos encounters Midas in the Canyons of Sorrow. The king tells the God of War to leave him alone and then retreats to a river of lava. Midas, in a state of delirium, hallucinated that this river of lava was the river Styx in the underworld, and thought he could rid himself of his curse by dipping his hands into the river. This only led him to dipping his hand into the lava and burning it off, also causing the lava to turn into solid gold, allowing Kratos to pass through the area. When Kratos next runs into Midas, the king is weeping in a cave in a state of hopelessness and misery, and Kratos, being the merciless monster that he was, beats the king unconscious, with the goal of preventing himself from being turned into gold and used the king's curse to traverse the lava fall. As Midas begged the gods for the release of death one final time, Kratos granted his wish, turning the lava fall and Midas himself into solid gold. Now the reason I think this moment stands out as one of the most disturbing moments in this series is due to something that's exclusive to this section. Midas is the weakest person Kratos has ever killed. We all know Kratos' reputation for killing gods, monsters, and even human beings, but all of these at least had the chance to run away. They wouldn't get too far, but at least they had some hope. On the other hand, when Kratos runs into Midas, he looks surprised to see the current state of the once mighty king. This becomes more disturbing as he tries to defend himself from the ghost of Sparta's attacks with his skinny little arms. Sometimes he succeeds, which allows him to crawl away like the defenseless old man that he is. People talk about Kratos killing his own family as the act that made him a monster, but I personally find it really difficult to watch whenever this old man clings to rocks and cracks on the ground as Kratos drags him away to his death. Pandora's temple itself in the original God of War game is tragic and disturbing in its own ways, be it the seemingly immortal yet rotten body burner and his duties, or the documented descent into insanity of the temple's architect Pathos Verdes III. The trials within the temple only became more and more depraved and gruesome, with some of them involving even the dead bodies of the architect's family members. But there was one trial that stands out as one of the most memorable moments in the entire game. You see, some of the soldiers who were attempting to reach Pandora's box themselves are still alive and fighting the guardians of the temple. One of these soldiers was unlucky enough to get himself captured and placed within a cage. Whenever Kratos arrives to where the soldier is being held captive, the soldier is ecstatic and tells Kratos to release him so that they can make their way back to Athens. Kratos' response?
The gods demand sacrifice. From all of us.
Oh, please, no.
As Kratos moves the cage to the designated sacrificial area, the soldier begs and pleads the gods of Sparta and even the gods of Olympus. With his efforts being completely in vain, the soldier meets a fiery end at the hands of the merciless and stone-faced Kratos. Even though the scraping of the cage and the soldier's screams gave us nightmares as impressionable 10-year-olds, we can still admire this section for its level of immersion. Other games would simply make this Sparta cutscene and be done with it. But no, God of War took it one step further and made the player drag the soldier to his death with their own hands. In this moment, the player truly becomes Kratos, a merciless killer who stops at nothing to get what he wants. No wonder Europe censored this moment with an undead legionnaire instead.
Our honorable mentions are mostly disturbing in a gruesome sense, and are all worthy of being on the list as their own entries if there were more than 5. Up first we have the death of Poseidon's enslaved princess in God of War 3. When Kratos meets her, she is begging for help, but when she sees Kratos, she declares that she doesn't want his help. Regardless, Kratos breaks her chain and leads her to the place of her ultimate doom. She is attached to a crank wheel in order to hold 2 doors open. As time goes on, the weight of the crank crushes the poor girl, leaving nothing but a pool of blood and her mangled feet sticking out from underneath. Next, we have the extremely brutal death of Hercules, also taking place in God of War 3. To be honest, it was really hard to choose between this and the death of Helios, but I want to say this was a lot more personal and just carnal, you know? Following Hercules proclaiming his jealousy and hatred towards his more successful and legendary brother Kratos, the two engage in a vicious battle, ending with Kratos ripping the Nemean cestus from Hercules' arm and brutally beating his brother's head in. With each powerful blow, we can see Hercules' face become more and more disfigured to the point of seeing his eyeballs bulging from the sockets, his nose being completely demolished, his teeth missing from his mouth, and his jaw being broken and left dangling from his lifeless crater-like head. The two gods fall through the floor after all the forceful attacks, with Kratos emerging as the obvious victor, and Hercules being left to rot in a pool of his own blood within the sewers of Olympus. And finally, we have Kratos' reunion with his daughter Calliope in the fields of Elysium from God of War Chains of Olympus. This one is a bit more heartbreaking than disturbing, which is the main reason why it's an honorable mention, but I couldn't help but cringe as I played through this part. Before his battle with Persephone, Kratos enters the field of Elysium, only to find his daughter Calliope, having cast aside his weapons and abilities in order to free himself of his sins and enter Elysium. As Kratos finally reunites with his daughter, saying that he will never leave her, Persephone reveals that she and the Titan Atlas plan to destroy the world and everything in it, including himself and his daughter. At that moment, Kratos knew that if Calliope were to remain happy and alive in Elysium, then he would need to forsake his only family forever. Having to make Kratos literally shove Calliope off of him was one of the hardest gut-wrenching things I've ever done in the God of War series. And after that, Kratos has to murder the other innocent souls in Elysium to once again become the monster that he was always meant to be, and he leaves his daughter sobbing and alone in the fields of Elysium forever. God of War Ghosts of Sparta has to be, without a doubt, the darkest game in the entire series. It's taken up 3 places on this list and could probably have taken up even more if the list was longer. This entry takes place after Kratos had already begun his warpath through the city of Atlantis, ultimately flooding and sinking the entire city. After defeating Poseidon's monster Scylla and releasing the Titan Thera, Kratos finds himself back in the main city of Atlantis, which is now crumbling and beginning to sink into the sea. As he makes his departure from the sinking city, Kratos comes across a mentally and physically broken unnamed soldier and his dead comrade, Dominus. This sight is a pretty disturbing one and to me is the most unnerving thing in the entire God of War series. We have this soldier with no eyes, cradling, singing, and giving praises of victory to this dismembered and disemboweled body. This eyeless, insane man had been left alive by Erinis, the daughter of Thanatos, just to send a message to Kratos. And Kratos' merciless, unconcerned reaction during such a vulnerable and just crazy moment is so messed up. Pair that with the music and overall atmosphere of the game and we have what I consider to be the most disturbing moment in all of God of War. And with that, we've come to the end of our God of War Halloween special. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And of course, be sure to go check out Kaptain Kuba and John Ford for their awesome work in this video. And also be sure to tell me what you consider to be the most disturbing moments in the God of War series. Thank you all so much for watching, and of course, take care.